the Talksport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the Talksport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search Talksport Fan Network.
Welcome back to the show, Cherries fans, and thank you for joining us. Now, of course, following our game against West Ham United, where we got a 1-1 draw, fantastic Enes Unal free kick. I think it was on the 88th minute or something, without checking. We travel up to Old Trafford. Now, last season, it was a very, very nice evening that we did have up there. Can we repeat that? We'll find out. Now, before we get stuck into our preview, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. Find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. So, of course, that 3-0 win, which, let's be fair, could have even been 5 against Manchester United last year. It is all changed, though, at Old Trafford. Erik Ten Hag has left the club and Ruben Amorim has come in. So there will be some challenges in there for the Cherries to compose themselves against. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to discuss Ruben Amorim's appointment, but also whether or not Ruben Amorim needs more time than Manchester United have given previous managers, starting, of course, with David Moyes. So it is a pleasure to welcome on from United TV, Rich. Welcome to the show, Rich. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
Not a problem at all. Our pleasure. Our pleasure. And of course, Sunday, a Sunday game against Manchester United. And of course, similar sort of time as to when we played you last season at Old Trafford. I'll tell you what, that's probably quite a good place to start. I know you might not want to discuss it straight away, but what went wrong from your view that day? Or was it that Bournemouth were just that much better to improve that much on previous?
I think there's a combination of things that, like last season, Manchester United had a lot of defeats, a lot of like one-sided defeats, and I think we just generally just too easy to play against. That you saw us last night. That there's a lot of mistakes in the team, but I think no, not recently, but last season definitely the way the team was set up by Erik Ten Hag. Whenever we conceded possession, because we're just pushing way too many men forward, like too many defenders getting high up the pitch, it's just a bit too gung-ho. A little bit like Spurs have been doing this season, where whenever we conceded possession, we just had so many gaps in midfield that we really invited loads of problems. And you took advantage of that. And we gave a lot of other teams chances, and sometimes they didn't take advantage. Sometimes they really hammered us. So it was just, for me, as a Manchester United fan, I think we were set up badly. And fair play to your team as well. You took your chances well, and that's why it's a great win for you guys. But I think Manchester United fans, we've been very critical of how Erik Ten Hag was organising our team, and ultimately we've seen this season that's why he's been sacked, why he's been replaced, because it wasn't good enough. We had an FA Cup win, which is fantastic, but our league positions was just dropping year after year. So yeah, I think that's what my perspective of it was.
Let's have a little look at the managers that you've had, because you've had absolutely loads in this past 11 years since Sir Alex Ferguson left. I think it's 11 years, isn't it? Since he left now. It's
Yeah, it sounds
gone
about right.
by, hasn't it? But for me, and this is something that I was speaking to, Man United fans about as well previously. For me, it feels that David Moyes was probably the man that maybe they should have stuck with, who was suggested by Sir Alex Ferguson, because it was a case of an era coming to an end. It felt like, and you might correct me on this, it felt like that side had probably reached, well, there was a lot of players reaching the end of their careers, and I think that's what really tempted Sir Alex to leave. Do you think that more time should have been given to David Moyes, or is there another manager, I should say,
Yeah,
who
I
would say,
think
yeah,
it's really tricky, isn't it? Because
mm,
I think you're 100% correct that it was pretty much the end of an era. And the way
yeah,
I saw it was that when Alex Ferguson was in charge, he always had an eye on the next generation of talent. So whether it was getting Wayne Rooney as a youngster, getting um, say Cristiano Ronaldo as a youngster, but we already had a competitive team, but we are always looking for like the next big talent, and we always seem to be doing that sort of approach to keeping our squad ticking over. So even when we won things like throughout the 90s, big players were leaving. So players like Ince, players like Hughes, Beckham left probably close to his prime. Van Nistelrooy, Jaap Stam, all these are like top quality players that left and were
yeah,
replaced. And Alex Ferguson had this really good sort of system. I think what happened was when he was getting towards the end of wanting to retire, obviously he knows he's going to be not the manager in a couple of years' time. So the players that he wants, he's not looking forward like 3 years, is he? He's looking forward like let's try and win the Premier League title on my last year as manager.
yeah,
So like Van Persie was like someone that you buy. He hits the ground running. He's had a really good season for Arsenal the year before, and we effectively won the title based on his goals and just keeping the team together. It's like the Chicago Bulls with their one more push, like get one more good season out of Rio Ferdinand, Vidic, Evra,
mhm,
and for me the team really hit the wall. I think it was one of those things that it would have been very difficult for any manager to come in. I think the thing that turned some people against Moyes was there was a couple of press conferences where he was discussing some of the decisions he was making, and I think one of the times he said, I thought Manchester United maybe I should have taken off. I can't remember if it was like Van Persie or another player.
yeah,
And he said, and he did say, I don't think the fans would have liked that. And he didn't make the decision. And so I question whether he was actually brave enough to back the decisions he thought he should make. It's a lot of pressure. To be honest, at the time, this might be a bit controversial because we did end up with him a bit later. Is I think Mourinho might have been a good manager to transition from Ferguson just because he'd won everything. He was quite good at setting up teams difficult to beat, but also get the best out of top players. So we did have a lot of high profile players then. We still had Rooney, we still had Van Persie, we had a lot of other very experienced professionals. And I think it might have been a bit better with him. But to be honest, it would have been still quite difficult because
yeah,
some of the best players were leaving the club, and obviously from my perspective as well, I think the Glazers were gradually reducing the quality of the squad. Players got sold, not replaced with adequate quality. So I think it became like a near impossible job of what after a few managers have been there and the situation it's kind of got to now. I think Moyes, in hindsight, might not have been the right man. I can see how from the outside maybe it looks like he didn't get enough time. I think the problem is that Manchester United just had so much success that as soon as we start dropping off quite badly, then they look at things, players and managers maybe with more of a proven track record. The problem is, I think, is that we went through so many managers that had different ways of playing, different styles, and I don't think that's really sustainable because you have this really bizarre squad where each manager gets a few signings, and you just think that the squad doesn't really work. So I think we got ourselves into a bit of a mess really and it's just got worse over time.
Yeah, I completely understand. And to be honest, it's something that I've always thought, and it's quite good actually what you said actually there, because a lot of people do think, well, David Moyes, should have had a little bit longer. He was Ferguson's pick. But there is so many styles and it's changed so often, hasn't it, really, at United? Um, let's look at Ruben Amorim, because of course he's come in. I don't think he's got off to, a bad start. I think Man United fans expect, you know, probably, and rightly so, probably a lot more, when a new manager comes in, they expect managers to hit the ground running. But with Ruben, do they need to, considering what Ten Hag has left behind, which seemed to be at the side which is depleted, the confidence and it seemed to go towards the end of his reign. Um, let's be fair, okay, that 3-0 win last season was great for us, but Manchester United haven't been in a good place for so long. Is it a case, Ruben Amorim, they have to give him time like they did Ferguson at first? Because, of course, Ferguson could have been sacked before he did go on this unbelievable run of winning trophies, which, of course, culminated in the treble.
Yeah, I think actually there's a few parallels you could draw with that. Was that Alex
Mm,
Ferguson had a very good relationship. I'm trying to think who it was now. Was it David Gill? There was like senior members of
yes.
Manchester United's board, and they worked together. And one of the things he did was there were a few players that, let's be honest, in the 80s there was a slightly less professional aspect of some
Hmm.
football players' lives, and I think some of the players that liked drinking too much were taken out of the club, and Alex Ferguson tried to modernise it. And unfortunately, some of those players are better players, and it did mean that they had to really buy into what Ferguson was doing behind the scenes in terms of sorting out the youth and everything. And we didn't see the results of that for years, but you could see behind the scenes that they knew what was going on, and they knew that Alex Ferguson was basically trying to reorganize the club. And he ended up, after being there for so long, ended up having a lot of control at Manchester United because he had kind of built it up to what it was. I think with Amorim, what he's doing is, and I would say actually, Manchester United probably got it quite wrong with Erik ten Hag. Not necessarily the appointment, but a lot of the player recruitment was almost like trying to buy the Ajax team in a way. And you look at an
Yeah.
Ajax team which, on the basis of a good cup run, which ultimately they lost to Spurs, which draws a few parallels with recent football
Yeah.
matches. But there seemed to be an over reliance on let's try and get players that have worked with Erik ten Hag. It's almost like you're just trying to build the team for the manager, which is, I think, a bit dangerous in this day and age because managers don't tend to stick around as long. Whereas other clubs that have gone through managers a bit quicker, maybe Chelsea is a good example. You build the squad, you find the manager that fits the squad. If that manager doesn't work out, you then try and find a manager that operates in a similar way. So we did a transfer window over the summer where we got a few players in. We did move a lot of players out, but we've ended up with this really disjointed squad, in my view, where there's a few youngsters coming through, like Mainu, Garnacho. But last season, they were almost like our most played players. It's almost like our success depended on two people making the sort of full debut seasons, which is really no, it's not very good. We have one striker at the club that's an out-and-out striker. He's 20. Now, the treble-winning season you mentioned, we had four strikers. You
Yeah.
could argue they're all in their prime. Teddy Sheringham, England international, Dwight York, and the list is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got this really not great squad as far as I'm concerned. And I think a lot of the fans look at Amarin, who did build really well at Sporting, but it did take him a few years. But also, Amarin seems to have this good relationship with Barada and Ineos, and it feels like they're going to work together. Where already, like a few weeks ago, if someone told me Rashford was going to get effectively frozen out of the team, which is what it seems like, I would just be thinking that's ridiculous. And Garnacho getting dropped as well for the Derby match, and Ahmad who virtually hardly ever played under Erik ten Hag, is now one of our most exciting players. It's like this is for me as a fan. It feels like the first rebuild. Like we've been talking about, let's try and rebuild. This feels like where someone's gone right. We are rebuilding because all these players are going, and you just think, wow, it is. It looks like it's actually happening. But when you do it that aggressively, I think it's inevitable that this is going to be a really tough season, and we're going to at some point, we're going to be a bit under strength because I don't know if you saw last night. We used a lot of squad players, and frankly,
Yeah.
they were poor. But I don't want to be too negative about certain
Mm.
players, but some players last night just showed that they're just not at the level. You wouldn't have them at your team. They're certainly not Premier League quality players. So there's a big job, and I think fans. I'm included in this as well. I think a lot of fans I speak to are more patient because they know the damage that's been done over multiple years, multiple transfer windows, and now we've got to go right. This is a disaster. We need to sort it out. You can't give Amorim like a year and a half, and then get a new manager in. We need to give him like at least his 2.5 year contract, then kind of see where we're at. But no, it's a huge job, unfortunately.
Of course, Marcus Rashford, who you did mention there, is rumoured to be wanting to find a way out. He's rumoured to, be unhappy with the situation. Would you be disappointed to see him leave? Because in the past year, it is fair to say that he's probably had a love-hate relationship with both Manchester United and, of course, the England national team.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's always a disappointment if
Hmm.
like Rashford, for me, like I know there's a lot of people on social media, and most people will be very negative towards Rashford. I think the frustrating thing is that he's obviously got a lot of ability. The question is for me, and this is going to be the way I look at it, is maybe two of the best Manchester United teams in recent memory will be the treble winning team that you mentioned earlier and the '08 team that had Rooney, Ronaldo, and that crazy defense. I think for the last sort of 5 years, Rashford's been one of the most important players sometimes in competitions where he's been like one of the main goal scorers. But if you dropped him into the '99 team, he would then become like one of many, and he would be like part of the rotation. And I think it's that the expectation on him at the moment is because of his high salary is that he should be delivering like X amount of goals,
Yeah.
etc. And I think it's frustrating. I think it's the issue we've had with the way we put our squad together is that it's not good enough, and then the best players will get heavily criticised because they're still going to be on a very high salary. And I'll be disappointed that it doesn't work out. I think the frustrating thing for other people is that has Rashford really made like the most effort to make it successful recently? And that I watched the games and I can watch highlights of say gigs when he was 39
Yeah.
and the amount of area he's covering and like Cristiano Ronaldo. I mean, I've been to watch. I think actually, luckily, I've managed to watch live the '99 team and the 2008 team, and the amount of effort put up by these players, and the amount of it's not just skill, is it? It's the amount of effort and determination.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
just have to question whether. I think the frustrating thing for fans is the effort. And I think if you're a limited ability player and you put in like 100% effort, the fans will never really, you can't
Mhm.
really criticize the player for trying the best. I think when you look at the players that are at the upper end of the skill spectrum, and if they're not really going at it, you just look at it and go, it's you're kind of just wasting your own career. So if he leaves, I won't be saying anything personally negative about him because despite what we've done the last few years, we still picked up trophies. He's been a part of that, but I think it's just frustrating that it's not going better. It does look like the writing's on the wall. I think.
One player as well that you have mentioned, and I'm a big fan of this lad, is Kobe Mainu. Um, and do you feel that the side really has to be built around him? Because it's going to take a little while for everything to come together. It's going to take a couple of windows, possibly, in my mind, for Amarim to get the side that he wants, because it seems to be so disjointed. Like you say, a lot of the youngsters, I agree with you, are not up to are not up to the Manchester United level. Let's be fair. The level that Manchester United fans expect. Okay, nobody expects them to be the Beckham, Nevilles, Giggs, Scholes, Nicky Butts, you name it. But they're nowhere near that. They're not even pushing that at the moment. Do you feel, though, Kobe Mainoo is probably the one man that you could say, right, okay, he probably would be able to compete with those sort of players? Do you think he's the man that they need to build the side around?
That's a good one. It's actually quite difficult to say at the moment because Amorim's quite new and he's trying to
Yeah,
mix up things a bit. And like at the moment, Agate seems to be like our new signing in midfield,
yeah,
and it's just the way I'm looking at it. I don't know if we really build the team around anybody at the moment. 'Cause I think he's trying to just make it a bit more fluid and more dynamic in attack.
mhm,
I think mainly for me is someone that I'm really struggling to think. Like, obviously, I think Mainoo should be part of the team. Is like, where's his best position? Because he
yeah,
did miss quite a bit of the season from injury, which is the frustration because I think he played way too many games last season, and I think that could be a factor in that. But he does look really good on the ball. He looks really composed for someone so young. Does look very, very like you said, a bit of a different level to some of the other players in terms of like how he understands the game. And it's just about working out where he fits in at the moment because we're still kind of as fans trying to work out how we're going to play. And if you've watched us at all, every single match we're making like 5, 6 changes. Amarin's kind of trying to work out who fits where. So I think this at the at the moment there's probably a role for him possibly next to Agate in midfield, where
yeah,
the role there I think one of them's going to be probably be a bit more defensive. Maybe he can get a bit more involved in the attack. But I think he sometimes looks quite good going forward in terms of like playing just behind the striker. And if we're playing in a sort of 3-4-3 with two sort of like two players that instead of being wingers, they're more tucked in, like two tens behind a striker. Maybe he could fit in there. So I think there's definitely a place for him. It would be a real shame if there isn't. But I think at the moment it's really hard to say. I think for me, from what I've seen, like no player's really safe. So
yeah,
maybe last season I would have said 100% we build around him. He's like a key player. Now I'm just thinking, I don't know. It depends. If it works out for him, I think he's got a really good chance because his attitude looks spot on as well. So I think he's, in terms of players that might make it, I think he's got a good chance.
yeah. I think Kobe Mainoo, quality player, and he harks back to the United players of old. One thing again I do want to touch upon. Again, you have mentioned him very briefly, Jim Ratcliffe. What do the United fans think of him? Because let's be fair, under Malcolm Glazer and the Glazer family, the club has been absolutely torn to shreds from those heavy heights, haven't hasn't it? Really, you know. Do you feel that Jim Ratcliffe is doing the right things? Because there has been a couple of murmurings of discontent about Ineos.
I think it's one of these things where you could ask 10 Manchester United fans and get
Yeah,
10 different like different reactions.
yeah,
I've heard everything from some people say it's just like the Glazers, that there's no change, and there's some people that don't trust them at all. There's other
mhm,
people looking at it thinking, there's going to be a takeover, like a full takeover eventually. That the idea is
yeah,
that they buy the club bit by bit. I think they're up to nearly 30% at the moment, and the idea is that they're going to try and gradually acquire full control. But
mhm,
I think some of the things he says like tick the right boxes in terms of we want to focus on the football. We've definitely seen an increase in the efficiency in the transfer window. Whether the players work out or not, it's yet to be seen. But they got people like Barada in. We've already got a sporting director and sacked a sporting director. So I think things are happening quickly, maybe too quickly in some instances. But there's been quite a lot of negative headlines regarding redundancies at the club. Like a lot of match day staff and other staff at the club got made redundant. And to be honest, I don't know enough detail about it. So because the Glazers been in charge for 20 years, and we know they
yeah,
weren't very effective at running the club in terms of trying to get football results. So I don't know whether the cuts are over aggressive or whether we just had too many staff. Like honestly, I couldn't really guess either way. But I think what's happened is that they came in saying, look, we're going to run the football side of it. It looks like they're doing a lot more than that. And to be honest, change is probably good based on where we were. But I think it's again really too early to tell. I think an optimistic fan would say, look, we've been run so badly. Now, as fans, we wanted football people in charge. You look at the corporate structure um, above Amorim at the moment, and you would say with people like Brad leading it and the other guys that Jim Radcliffe's got in, you'd say, look, we've got football people in charge now, and they're making some decisions. So we've got to see how it works out. It looks like they've got a plan in terms of how they want to build the squad. And it looks like they're going to be quite aggressive in the transfer market. And it looks like, as Manchester United fans, we've had transfer windows where we chase one target for months and months and end up getting no one or some free agents. And this time we kind of went out with a list in mind, and we seem to have got most of them. So I'm gonna be positive and say, look, it looks like it might be going in the right direction, but until we start seeing improvements on the pitch, then it's just hoping at the moment.
Nah, fingers crossed for you, because I think, the club and other fans have seen it from far that the Glazers haven't been popular. They've made some very strange decisions. There's a lot of money that's been lent against the actual club, and wasn't it the money to actually buy the club was leveraged against Manchester United as well, wasn't it?
I think so. I'm trying to think what it
Yeah,
was now, because I can't remember how much the exact price was, but I think there was like I can't remember what it's called now, maybe some hedge fund borrowing from there. Then
yeah,
they put the debt on the club. So the thing is, though, Manchester United has a massive revenue streams and a huge
true.
turnover, but as fans, it's just like the money's just been funneled out of the club, and I think that's the frustrating thing that like Everton had just been taken over. I think that was announced. I don't know if it was announced yesterday and you just
Yeah,
wonder like what's happening to the rest of the football clubs, because there's all this money and all those transfer fees and everything's like getting more expensive, but I'm not seeing better football. Well, certainly not for my team, and I'm just wondering whether this is actually good for the game or not.
no, completely agree. Well, before we get on to predictions, do tell us, Rich, where everybody can find you on YouTube and other platforms.
Yeah, certainly. If people look for United TV or RD United TV, I think there's a link in the description.
Yes.
Then come and find us. And obviously we're mainly Manchester United, but we do like a chat with other fan bases as well. So we do get a lot of fan bases coming in the chat to have a discussion. We do sometimes cover more Premier League teams as well. And it's Rich Sports 7 on Twitter if you want to argue with me about football things, but I tend to not use it too much. I usually just use it for like messaging people and just posting a few links and things. But people are welcome to follow me. I'm not too controversial. I'm at the moment I'm just disappointed with the way my team's going, but hopefully things are going to get better. But yeah, check it out and just leave a comment or something. I usually reply back to them quite quickly.
Awesome. And like Rich says, in the description below is the link as well. So go and subscribe to United TV. Right, Rich, we do this for every single game. You know what's coming. Prediction time. How do you think he's going to go?
I think it's going to be a tough one, isn't it? For
Yeah,
my point of view, I think it's going to be difficult. That we've been struggling this season, and honestly don't know about how well it's going to go. The game midweek, I don't think that's really going to be much of a reflection because we'll probably be changing the team massively. I think what is
yeah,
difficult is that you're on a really good run and you've had some very good results recently. So it's kind of difficult to see. I'm just wondering how good your team will be. I know you've had some quite impressive wins over the season. I'm kind of leaning towards a draw with this game because I'm just wondering whether, like the weird game midweek, whether it took much out of us. If we got a win, then I think I'd be absolutely happy considering like you're fifth in the league, no, sixth in the league at the moment.
Sixth in the league, yeah, it's unbelievable. The highest we've ever finished is ninth, and
You scored more
yeah,
goals than us. We're not scoring goals, so
mm,
I'm concerned. I'd probably go with like maybe like a 1-1 draw.
fair enough. 1-1 draw. Well, if we go back to when you was winning the Premier League every single year, well, going back to 2008, which you did mention, we was on -17 starting the season with Kevin Bond and then Jimmy Quinn of all people. So yeah, how things have kind of changed a little bit. But I'm not going to bet against my own team, Rich. I've got faith that and personally, I think that we're going to rotate because we're going to have to rotate the team. I think we've played a lot of matches. There's a lot of players I think that look a little bit fatigued, but I personally think that we'll do that against Crystal Palace at home rather than Manchester United away. Um, I think there will be probably a couple of changes. Lewis Cook, who's so good at Old Trafford last season, I can't see him not playing. Semenyo, well, one of the first names on the team sheet. Although, personally, I think he is maybe struggling through a knock or is a little bit tired himself. So I'm going to go for a 3-1 win. Um, I think we're going to play a similar sort of side to what lined up against West Ham, but yeah, unfortunately for Manchester United fans, I think we're going to wait till the Palace game on Boxing Day to actually rest a couple of players because we're not going to get through these next 4 games by not resting anybody. But I don't think it's going to be against you guys. Sorry, Rich. That's probably not what you wanted to hear, was it?
No, to be honest, I think the way we're playing at the moment, we do look improved on last season. I think if you
Yeah.
scored 3 goals, then we're actually we're not giving up too many chances, but we have been
Mm,
error prone. So like Bayern had a nightmare last night. Martinez had a bit of a
yeah.
nightmare. So I think you could get a couple of goals based on errors. I would be very surprised if you cut through us like you did last season. But anyway, if it'd be interesting to see what you think. So even if you just send me a message after the match, just to see if you see any changes, because I'm seeing changes, but at the moment it's not really translating into better results because it's quite early days. But it'll be interesting to see what you think.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, that's going to be quite a good, and it would be an interesting video to actually discuss something. Wow. When we do that, I'm not sure because of Christmas, but of course, last season was, our side. I think our side have improved on last season, um, but I've got to agree that I think Manchester United under Amorim will have been toughened up a little bit. So yeah, it might be a good discussion point that actually that. But Rich, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Like you say, the link is below, so please do go and subscribe to United TV, and no doubt we'll speak later on in the season as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and so all the best for the season. Apart
Likewise.
from that match, and yeah, maybe you can surprise people and stay up there, which should be quite an achievement.
Do you think we might get Europe? Do you think we might get Europe?
It's one of those seasons, isn't it,
Mm,
where it's one of those seasons where there's going to be a surprise team in Europe, I think. And looking
yeah.
at it, it could be there's a few teams like maybe Brighton, Fulham, Bournemouth, Brentford, all possibly in there. I think in the end, teams like Spurs, Newcastle, Manchester United, I think one or two of
Mhm.
those will probably get some of those Europa positions. But I think at the moment you're best placed out of those teams, and just keep going for it because you never know. There's always going to be one team that just is consistent over the season, and I think you got points on the board already. But so you never know.
Yeah. I, I've always been saying, throughout the season, get to 38 points and then just try whatever we can to get, as high up as we can. We finish in the European places. Well, it's beyond our wildest dreams. But yeah, bring on the Moldovan Premier League champions.
No, it could be fun. It could be fun, couldn't it? Europa Conference. It could be an experience for fans and something that West Ham showed was it a couple of years ago, that you could have an exciting season lined up if you get some European football.
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. It's something that we've never experienced. It'd be great to experience. We shall see. Rich, again, thank you so much, and we'll catch up very soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
And thank you everybody for joining us. Hit the like, subscribe, the bell button below. It helps this channel to grow. Now do keep in mind, we do have a lot of special guests on here as well. Do check out our interview with David Icke. That is on the interview playlist. You'll also find on that interview playlist interviews with Kasabian 5, Hardfire, the Blue Tones, The Farm, Happy Mondays, Ocean Colours Scene, Dodgy. Have I left anybody out? Have I included People to Ice? I don't know. I'm not going to listen back to it to tell you, but go and check it out. Also, like I say, hit like, subscribe, the bell button below. It helps the channel to grow. Until the next video, though, thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.
The Talksport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the Talksport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search Talksport Fan Network.